The River's Secret, a Detective Sherman case file. Disclaimer: this story contains sensitive content and is only suitable for viewers 18 years and older. The following is based on true events, but all names have been changed to protect identities. This account is provided for informational and educational purposes only. I've spent 30 years investigating homicides, but some cases still manage to shock me to my core. What you're about to hear is one of those cases, a story so disturbing that it challenges our very understanding of human nature and the institution of marriage. My name is Detective Sherman, and I specialize in cases that most law enforcement agencies have either abandoned or failed to fully understand. This particular case took me to the rural heartland of China, where ancient traditions and modern desperation collided with devastating consequences. If you were to look at their marriage certificate, you'd see just one photo, the only image this couple ever took together. Their expressions revealed no hint of the tragedy that would unfold just 4 short months later. It appears almost unremarkable. A standard government document stamped and filed, officially binding 2 strangers in matrimony. But beneath that bureaucratic formality lies a tale of cultural pressure, financial exploitation, and ultimately, murder. I want you to imagine for a moment what it would be like to be married to someone you barely know, someone chosen for you based on appearance and financial transactions. How would you react if that rushed union quickly devolved into resentment, captivity, and violence? I ask you to consider these questions because what happened to Xiao Yan, a young bride murdered by her husband's family just 4 months after her wedding, offers a chilling glimpse into the darkest consequences of treating marriage as a business transaction rather than a loving partnership. This is her story. Part 1. The Bride Price. On the crisp morning of January 4, 2016, the Guangfeng District Public Security Bureau in Shangra City, Jiangxi Province, China, received a distressing emergency call. I was working as a consulting detective for international cases at the time, and this call would eventually bring me halfway across the world. The caller identified himself as Pan Han, a middle-aged farmer whose voice trembled with a mixture of fear and rage. His daughter, Pan Xiao Yan, had been missing since earlier that day, and the last people seen with her were her husband Hang Dong and his 2 older brothers, Wei and Hang Fei. They took her by force, Han explained, his voice breaking. They came to our home with 7 or 8 men, grabbed my daughter, and forced her into their car. What made this case immediately alarming was the message Xiao Yan had managed to send to her brother, Pan Sha, who was working in Inner Mongolia. Come home quickly and claim my body. I won't survive this. Those 11 words sent a chill through every officer who read them. This wasn't a typical missing person case. This was a young woman predicting her own murder. I asked myself, as you might be wondering now, what could possibly drive a family to such extremes against their own daughter-in-law? What kind of dispute ends with a bride being kidnapped by her husband's family? The answer, as is often the case in my line of work, was both simpler and more complex than one might imagine. Money. Specifically, 120,000 yuan, about 18,500 USD at the time, paid as a bride price. If you're not familiar with this concept, let me explain. In several Asian cultures, particularly in rural China, marriage involves a financial transaction where the groom's family pays money or gifts to the bride's family. It's a tradition with deep historical roots, originally meant to symbolize respect and provide security for the bride. But as I've seen in numerous cases, tradition can sometimes morph into something unrecognizable and dangerous. When Shangra police officers arrived at the Pan family home that morning, the gravity of the situation became immediately apparent. Xiao Yan's mother, Lei Mai, was being treated for injuries sustained while trying to prevent her daughter's abduction. She had clung desperately to the minibus door as it began to pull away, resulting in a severe finger injury and a head wound. But it was what happened at the police station later that day that truly set this case apart. When officers questioned Hang Hongxin, Dong's father, about his missing daughter-in-law, his response wasn't one of concern. Instead, he made a chilling demand. If you want to find her, return the bride price first. Pay the money and we'll release her. It was an admission of what amounted to kidnapping, stated with the casual confidence of someone who believed their actions were entirely justified. What Hongxin didn't realize, that none of the Hang family realized, was that Xiao Yan had already sent that final desperate message to her brother, a message that would prove prophetic within hours. As I reviewed the initial police reports, I discovered that Pan Xiao Yan and Hang Dong had officially registered their marriage on September 7, 2015, just 4 months before her disappearance. What had started as a seemingly ordinary arranged marriage had deteriorated with stunning speed. But why had Dong forcibly taken his wife? What did Hongxin mean by releasing her only after the bride price was returned? And most importantly, where was Xiao Yan now? To understand this case fully, we need to step back and examine how these two strangers came to be husband and wife in the first place. Part 2. A Marriage Arranged. The matchmaker, Zung Joan, was well known throughout Shangra City. For decades, she had arranged marriages between families, building a reputation as someone who could find the perfect match for anyone for the right price, of course. In June 2015, she began searching for a suitable bride for 29-year-old Hang Dong. After presenting him with 7 or 8 potential candidates, Dong finally settled on Pan Xiao Yan Yung, beautiful, and according to him, exactly his physical type. I've always preferred slim, slender women, Dong later told investigators. Xiao Yan was perfect. What's striking about this case, and would be unthinkable to many of you watching this, is the time frame. Within just 3 days of meeting, Dong and Xiao Yan completed the traditional matchmaking ceremony. 3 days to decide on a life partner. Imagine that for a moment. Would you trust your judgment of someone after just 72 hours? Would you feel comfortable binding your life to theirs after such a brief acquaintance? I've investigated enough failed marriages to know that love at first sight, while romantic in concept, rarely provides the foundation needed for a successful long-term relationship. But in rural China, particularly among families eager to secure their children's futures, such rapid arrangements weren't uncommon. Over the next 3 months, however, something unusual happened, or rather, didn't happen. The two families barely interacted. Dong later recalled realizing less than a month after meeting Xiao Yan that she wasn't interested in him. She never smiled at me, he said during questioning. Every time we met, I was excited and warm, while she was cold and indifferent. Both families noticed this tension and grew concerned. Rather than recognizing these as warning signs and allowing the young people to reconsider, they turned to the matchmaker, Zung Joan, for advice. Her solution was simple: have them register the marriage immediately. According to Joan, once the couple had an official marriage certificate, everything else would naturally fall into place. This perspective that legal documentation somehow creates emotional connection may seem foreign to many of us, but it reflects a cultural approach to marriage that prioritizes formal commitment over personal compatibility. Xiao Yan's parents, Pan Han and Lei Mai, were skeptical. Having never legally registered their own marriage, which was not uncommon in rural areas, they questioned whether a certificate would really make a difference. Does a marriage certificate really hold that much power? They asked Joan. Her response was confident. A marriage certificate is just a piece of paper. It doesn't mean much on its own, but the power it holds is immense. Under her persuasion, both Dong and Xiao Yan reluctantly agreed to register their marriage at the Civil Affairs Bureau. But before this could happen, an important transaction needed to occur was the payment of the bride price. The Hang and Pan families reached an agreement. Hong Xin would pay 120,000 yuan to Han's family as the bride price for Xiao Yan. On September 7, 2015, Hong Xin gathered this substantial sum representing perhaps years of savings for a rural family and handed it over. Xiao Yan was given a bank card, and only then did she and Dong officially complete their marriage registration. According to Dong, the entire time they had spent together from their first meeting to their marriage registration was less than 5 days total. Think about that, less time than many people spend choosing a new car or planning a vacation, yet they are now legally bound as husband and wife. Local custom dictated that on the night of the dowry payment, Xiao Yan should move into her husband's home. But breaking with tradition, Xiao Yan refused. Instead, Dong found himself following Xiao Yan back to her parents' home in Huan Village for their first night as newlyweds. That evening, when Dong attempted to consummate the marriage, Xiao Yan refused, insisting she needed more time to mentally prepare. After being rejected twice, Dong became increasingly frustrated. Late that night, in a fit of anger, he got in his car and attempted to leave. Before he could get far, Han and Mai called him, urging him to return. Under pressure from both families, Xiao Yan finally relented and agreed to share a room with Dong. But by the next morning, something was clearly wrong. Xiao Yan appeared visibly distressed and made a shocking claim to her mother. Dong has a men's health problem. He can't have a normal married life, and he can't have children. This accusation quickly reached Dong's family. His father, Hong Xin, was furious. "What kind of nonsense is this?" he demanded. "There's nothing wrong with my son. It's Xiao Yan who refuses to enter his room. I don't want to say too much, but let me ask if she has a health problem instead." As both families hurled accusations at each other, tensions escalated rapidly. To resolve the dispute, on September 9, 2015, just 2 days after their marriage registration, Dong and Xiao Yan went together to a specialized hospital in Shangra for medical examinations. The results only deepened the conflict. According to the hospital's diagnosis, the 29-year-old dog was found to have 4 medical conditions, including syphilis, prostatitis, and fatty liver disease. The doctor stated that full treatment would cost over 20,000 yuan. Dong, unable to afford this treatment himself, demanded that his wife Xiao Yan pay for it using the bride price money. In his mind, the 120,000 yuan was marital property, giving him the right to use it. Xiao Yan, however, refused outright to hand over the money. This financial dispute quickly became the second major rift between them, with the first being their fundamental incompatibility. As a detective who's seen countless marriages collapse, I can tell you that money and intimacy are two of the most common catalysts for marital breakdown. In Dong and Xiao Yan's case, both issues emerged almost immediately, creating a perfect storm of conflict. The divide between the Pan and Hang families only deepened in the following months. The central issue became the return of the bride price. The Hang family argued that since the marriage had failed, the Pan family should return the full amount. The Pan family firmly refused, citing two reasons. First, Xiao Yan had already legally registered her marriage with Dong. If she got divorced, it would damage her reputation and make it difficult for her to remarry later, an important social concern in rural China. Since this situation hurt their daughter's future prospects, they believed the groom's family should compensate for this loss, meaning they would not return the bride price. Second, before the medical examination, both families had allegedly made a verbal agreement. If Dong was found to have a serious medical condition, then the bride price would not need to be returned. This dispute festered for months, with periodic attempts at mediation all ending in failure. By early January 2016, the situation had reached a breaking point. On January 1st, the Hang brothers Wei, Fei, and Dong visited the Pan home to confront Xiao Yan directly. They believed the marriage could still be salvaged, but Xiao Yan's continued refusal to return to her husband's home only increased their resentment. Hoping for resolution, they approached the Huan village committee for mediation. According to village chief Gu Renfu, they attempted to broker a compromise, but neither family would budge. The Hang family initially demanded reimbursement for all wedding-related costs, including the matchmaker's fee and engagement gifts, totaling 160,000 yuan. The Pan family refused, arguing that the Hang family had exaggerated the amount by including minor expenses such as cigarettes and sunflower seeds used during the introduction meeting. Eventually, the Hang family agreed to lower their demand to 120,000 yuan, just the original bride price. Han reluctantly agreed to this amount, but Xiao Yan and her mother strongly objected. "I've already spent the bride price," Xiao Yan stated firmly. "Even if you kill me, I won't be able to return it." With negotiations at a stalemate, the Hang family issued a chilling threat as they left. "If the Pan family doesn't return the money, we'll come and take her in 3 days." At the time, both the village officials and the Pan family dismissed this as an angry outburst. No one expected the Hang brothers would actually follow through. But 3 days later, on January 4th, they returned, and what happened next set in motion a chain of events that would end in tragedy. Part 3, the abduction. If you've ever witnessed a home invasion, you know the paralyzing fear it induces, the violation of your most private space, the helplessness as strangers impose their will upon you. Now imagine those intruders are your in-laws, people who should be your extended family, coming to take you by force. This is what happened to Xiao Yan on that fateful January morning. Before carrying out their plan, Hongxun gave his sons strict instructions. The Pan family won't return the money until they're forced to. They won't give in unless they're truly desperate. To strengthen their intimidation tactics, the Hang brothers recruited 4 extra workers from a nearby construction site, creating a small mob of 7 men. Pan Han, Xiao Yan's father, was watering crops in his fields when he noticed several unfamiliar vehicles entering the village. Sensing trouble, he hurried back home to find a group of burly men standing outside his house. Trying to ease tensions, Han brought out chairs for the Hang family to sit on. But before anyone could take a seat, Xiao Yan stormed forward, overturned the chairs, and snapped angrily, "You people still have the nerve to sit? What are you all doing here with so many people?" As the situation escalated, Hong Xin pulled Han aside for a private conversation. Although Han agreed to return the 120,000 yuan bride price, Xiao Yan continued to refuse. At that point, Hong Xin made a new proposition. "If you won't return the money, then come with us to Guangdong City and stay for a few days." Xiao Yan rejected him outright. "Why should I go with you? What's wrong with staying in my own home?" The argument quickly drew attention from villagers, but seeing it was a family dispute, most chose not to intervene. Even the Huan village officials were hesitant to get involved. As tensions reached a breaking point, the Hang family took extreme action. Hong Xin ordered his eldest sons Wei and Fei to restrain Han and his wife, while he and Dong forcibly dragged Xiao Yan into a minibus. The scene was chaotic and violent. In desperation, Mai broke free from the Hong brothers' grasp and rushed forward, grabbing the car door with her bare hands to prevent the vehicle from leaving. In the struggle, her finger was caught in the door, causing a serious injury. By the time police officers arrived about 15 minutes later, responding to a call from Xiao Yan's brother-in-law, the three Hang brothers had already taken Xiao Yan in their minibus and driven her to Guangfeng district. Deputy Police Chief Zhu Xialong immediately called Xiao Yan to confirm her safety. Over the phone, she told Zhu that she had been taken to Guangfeng and was being held in Dong's rental apartment. To reassure her parents, Zhu allowed Xiao Yan to speak directly with them. After hearing their daughter's voice, Han and Mai felt slightly relieved. But that relief would be short-lived, for just one day later, both Dong and Xiao Yan would mysteriously vanish. Let me pause here and ask you to consider. If you were in Xiao Yan's position, forcibly taken from your home by your in-laws, separated from your parents, and held against your will, what would you do? Would you submit to their demands? Would you try to escape? Or would you, like Xiao Yan, send a desperate message predicting your own demise? These are the questions that haunt me as I investigate cases like this one. Questions about human resilience, desperation, and the lengths to which people will go when pushed to their limits. Part 4. The Mysterious Disappearance. After the abduction, Wei and Fei remained at Han's house for a while. According to their later testimony, Hong Xin had instructed them to stay behind to calm down the Pan family. During the struggle, Mai had suffered a head injury and damaged her finger in the car door. The Hang brothers offered to take her to the county hospital for treatment, but she refused, fearing further intimidation if she went to Guangfeng. Eventually, at the police's suggestion, Han and Mai reluctantly agreed to ride with Wei to Guangfeng County Hospital. While Mai was being treated, Hong Xin unexpectedly visited them, even offering to pay her 114 yuan medical bill. Later, he invited Han and Mai to have lunch at the fruit shop he managed. During the meal, Hong Xin made a seemingly conciliatory appeal. Both families should get along. They're already married, so they should just live together peacefully. The Huan village officials, also present at lunch, assumed the conflict would soon resolve itself. But Han and Mai remained uneasy. Their daughter and son-in-law were nowhere to be seen. Although Hong Xin repeatedly assured them that Xiao Yan and Dong were on a trip together to strengthen their relationship, Han and Mai weren't convinced. To verify Xiao Yan's safety, Han contacted his eldest son Sha in Inner Mongolia. Since Sha couldn't return immediately, Han called two of his son's friends in Guangfeng City for help. Deputy Police Chief Zhu also sensed something was wrong. To further confirm Xiao Yan's well-being, he called her at noon. Xiao Yan answered and assured him she was fine, but shortly after Dong took the phone and told Zhu that everything was under control and there was nothing to worry about. However, by 3 p.m. that afternoon, when Han tried calling his daughter again, her phone was turned off and completely unreachable. By 6 p.m., the village chief received an alarming call from Hong Xin. If Xiao Yan doesn't return the 120,000 yuan bride price soon, my son Dong will take her away and we won't be able to stop him. This sudden statement raised immediate alarms. With Xiao Yan's unexpected disappearance, Zhu and his team launched an emergency operation around 8 p.m. After investigating, they located the rental apartment where Dong and Xiao Yan had been staying, but when they arrived, both were gone. Zhu called Hong Xin again, who claimed Dong had taken Xiao Yan back to her parents' home. By 11 p.m., Han and Mai still hadn't seen their daughter. Then, in a puzzling development, Hong Xin himself called the police, reporting that his own son Dong had also gone missing. What had started as a marital dispute that might have been resolved through negotiation had now spiraled into a full-blown mystery, with both Xiao Yan and Dong vanishing without a trace. The next morning, the Criminal Investigation Team of the Guangfeng District Public Security Bureau launched a citywide search while legally summoning Hong Xin, Wei and Fei for questioning. During interrogation, the three men were questioned separately, but their behavior was strange and their statements inconsistent. According to Wei, he had brought lunch to Dong at noon on January 4th. When he entered the rental apartment, he saw Xiao Yan sitting on the sofa, playing on her phone and talking to Dong. He claimed not to have heard their conversation clearly, stating that he simply placed the food down and left to return to work at the construction site. The police found no obvious inconsistencies in Wei's statement and shifted their focus to Fei. His responses, however, were evasive. No matter what the police asked, he repeatedly stated, "I don't know," suggesting that officers should ask his father instead. When officers pressed Hong Xin for answers, he brushed off their inquiries, appearing indifferent and unconcerned. Multiple times he emphasized, "I'm old. I can't control what my 3 sons do." The conflicting statements and blame shifting convinced police that the Hang family was hiding something significant. By January 6, 2016, both Dong and Xiao Yan's phones remained turned off. Shangra police attempted to contact Dong via WeChat using Fei's account. Dong finally responded, but his message raised more suspicions. The police, posing as Fei, sent a message saying, "The family is in chaos right now. You need to come back immediately." Instead of revealing his location, Dong replied cryptically, "Don't worry, I'll bring Xiao Yan back tomorrow." From his response, it seemed Dong was still with Xiao Yan. But why was he being so evasive about his whereabouts? Investigators began to suspect that Xiao Yan had been taken against her will and could have been threatened or subjected to violence. After checking all bus stations and high-speed rail stations in Shangra City, they found no record of the couple leaving the city. Could they have used another form of transportation? Officers decided to visit Hong Xin's home for further investigation. There, they found 2 cars belonging to the Hang family and Dong's motorcycle still parked at the house. However, one vehicle was missing: Fei's red and blue Suzuki motorcycle. When questioned about this, Fei gave a vague response, saying the motorcycle had been parked near the house but was now gone, possibly stolen. An investigator asked, "If it was stolen, why didn't you report it?" Fei nonchalantly replied, "It's just stolen, nothing worth reporting." This strange attitude deepened suspicions. In a typical household, a motorcycle is a valuable possession, and most people would report its theft. Fei's indifference suggested he was covering up the truth. Even more puzzling was Hong Xin's response when questioned about the missing vehicle. He simply said, "I don't even know we had that motorcycle." All signs pointed to Fei's motorcycle being connected to the disappearance of Dong and Xiao Yan. If the couple had used it to leave Shangra, they likely hadn't traveled too far. The police immediately issued a search alert to hotels and inns in nearby districts and cities, focusing on couples traveling by motorcycle. Their efforts paid off on the morning of January 7, 2016, when they received a critical tip from Puang Police in Fujian Province, a neighboring region. According to Puang authorities, on the evening of January 5th, a young man named Wu Jia had checked into a local hotel. Since the ID used for registration showed he was from Guangfeng District, Shangra City, Puang Police quickly identified his whereabouts. According to the hotel's surveillance footage, Wu Jia wore a yellow helmet throughout the entire check-in process, seemingly trying to conceal his identity. Shangra Police used information from the ID card to contact the real Wu Jia, who denied being in Fujian Province, claiming he had been working in Shanghai and that his ID card had been lost previously. Investigators suspected the man at the hotel was using Wu Jia's lost ID. Officers were dispatched to Puang to review additional surveillance footage from the area surrounding the hotel. The breakthrough came when they discovered that the motorcycle the suspect had used was the same red and blue Suzuki motorcycle that Fei had claimed was stolen. On the afternoon of January 7, 2016, Shangra Police summoned Fei for another round of questioning. With video evidence showing Dong riding the motorcycle, officers directly confronted Fei. "Is this your motorcycle?" Fei's expression became visibly tense. He remained silent for a long time before making 2 unusual requests. First, he wanted to meet with his older brother Wei. Second, he insisted that their father should not be informed about the situation. After speaking with Wei, Fei finally revealed a shocking truth. On the night of January 4, 2016, Xiao Yan had been pushed off a bridge into a river by Dong. As for whether she survived, Fei claimed he didn't know. When asked how he was so certain about what had happened, Fei admitted that both he and their father, Hong Xin, were present at the scene. This revelation was a major breakthrough, but it raised new questions. What roles did Fei and Hong Xin play in the crime? And most urgently, was there any chance Xiao Yan had survived? Part 5. The Desperate Search. Imagine standing on a bridge in the cold January night, looking down at the dark, rushing water below. The air is frigid, the river deadly cold. Now imagine being forced onto that bridge against your will, faced with 3 men who see you not as a human being, but as a problem that needs to be eliminated. Using the information provided by the Hang family, Shangra police split into two teams, one to track Dong's escape route and another to search the river where Xiao Yan had been pushed. 3 hours later, the first police team arrived at a hotel in Sanming, Fujian province, where they apprehended Dong. Initially, he resisted interrogation, but after learning that his father and brother had already confessed, he finally admitted to his crime. Let me take you back to 8:00 p.m. on January 4th, 2016, the night everything changed. Fei had been eating dinner outside when he received a phone call. It wasn't Dong's voice on the line, but their father's. Hong Shun instructed Fei to refuel his motorcycle, then return to the rental apartment where Dong was staying. At the time, Fei didn't understand his father's intentions, but followed his instructions. When he arrived at the apartment entrance, Hong Shun had already called for a taxi, an unusual action since their family owned 2 cars. Hong Shun explained that he and Dong wanted to take Xiao Yan to a relative's house in secret, which was why they needed a taxi. Without further explanation, Xiao Yan was forcibly pulled into the vehicle while Fei followed behind on his motorcycle. At that moment, Fei was still completely unaware of the horrific event about to unfold. He naively assumed that his father and younger brother simply wanted to pressure the Pan family into returning the 120,000 yuan dowry. About 30 minutes later, the taxi approached Lingshan village in Xinzhou district, Shangra City. Suddenly, Hong Shun ordered the driver to stop, then led Xiao Yan out of the car. From there, the Hong men forced Xiao Yan to walk approximately 1 kilometer, eventually arriving at a deserted bridge. By this point, Dong had completely lost control of his emotions. Facing his newlywed wife, he appeared utterly desperate. Fei still assumed his younger brother was merely trying to intimidate Xiao Yan further, but what happened next was beyond anything he could have imagined. Dong, in a fit of rage and despair, pushed Xiao Yan off the bridge into the cold river below. During interrogation, when police asked Dong why he pushed his wife into the river, he replied with chilling detachment, "At that moment, I really didn't care anymore. I only have one life, so whatever happens, happens. She wanted to die, so I'll just go with her." According to Hong Shun's testimony, the decision to take Xiao Yan onto the bridge was not spontaneous. It was carefully planned. Years ago, when Hong Shun worked as a butcher selling pork in rural areas, he had become familiar with the roads and rivers in the region. Before the murder, he claimed he had tried to dissuade Dong from committing the crime, but his son refused to listen, a claim that investigators found dubious given his active role in facilitating the entire sequence of events. If you followed this case closely, you might be wondering, why was Dong so determined to kill Xiao Yan? After all, the couple had only been legally married for 4 months. They were supposed to be enjoying the honeymoon phase of their relationship. Could a 120,000 yuan dowry dispute alone truly be enough motivation for such a brutal crime? And even more disturbingly, why did Dong's father and brother stand beside him, watching him commit murder without intervening? To understand the psychology behind this heinous act, we need to examine the events of that day more closely. According to the Shangra police investigation, as early as September 20th, 2015, just 14 days after Dong and Xiao Yan registered their marriage, both sides had already started discussing separation. In a WeChat conversation recovered by police, Dong asked Xiao Yan what she was thinking, and she didn't hold back, replying, "Think for yourself. You're sick and never told me." and now I have to suffer because of you." Dong immediately demanded that the Pan family return the bride price so they could go their separate ways. But Xiao Yan refused, stating, "Looking for me won't help. This has to be settled legally." By the end of the conversation, the Hang and Pan families were threatening and attacking each other verbally, with the conflict escalating rapidly. On the morning of January 4th, 2016, after Dong had forcibly taken Xiao Yan back to his rental apartment, he kept pressing her about the bride price money. Her inconsistent answers, first claiming she had it, then saying her parents had it, only fueled his anger. Meanwhile, Xiao Yan's brother Sha, after receiving his father's call for help, immediately contacted Dong by phone. Sha directly threatened Dong, demanding that he return his sister to Huan village immediately. Dong, however, gave him an ultimatum. "If you want her back, return the full bride price first." Hearing this, Sha exploded with anger. "Forget 120,000 yuan, I'd even give 300,000. But I won't be the one paying, and my sister won't be the one returning it to you." This heated exchange only fueled Dong's rage further. Shortly after, Sha reached out to two of his friends, asking them to track down Dong's location and rescue Xiao Yan. Unfortunately, Dong found out about this plan and called Sha back with a threat. "If your friends dare show up here, I'll grab a knife and go down fighting." By 3 p.m. that same day, Sha called again, warning that he had gathered a group of local enforcers and demanding that Dong release his sister immediately. Upon hearing this, Dong completely snapped. He shouted into the phone, "You think I'm afraid of you? Let me tell you, I can do anything." After hanging up, Dong went straight to his father. Through the matchmaker, Zhang Zhong, he sent a final ultimatum to Xiao Yan's father. "You must return the full bride price before 5 p.m. today. If not, I'll do things to Xiao Yan that you can't even imagine." What's particularly disturbing about this case is how quickly the conflict escalated from a financial dispute to kidnapping and ultimately murder. Most people would assume that the situation couldn't possibly go any further, that cooler heads would prevail or authorities would intervene. But what happened instead reveals the darkest aspects of human nature when pushed to extremes. After learning about his son's argument with Dong, Han became even more resolute. He believed that his family had already endured enough humiliation and that there was no way they would return the bride price easily. Instead, he insisted that the Hang family should compensate them for their losses. Han later revealed to police that he believed once the conflict settled, they could go to court for mediation. He never imagined that the Hang family would take matters into their own hands in such a violent way. By the evening of January 4th, the die was cast. Dong made his intentions clear to his father. "We don't need the bride price anymore. I just want her gone. I don't want to see her again. I want to get rid of her." As a father, Hong Xin should have stopped him. Instead, he carefully guided Dong in planning the crime. "If you're going to do it," Hong Xin coldly advised, "don't do it in the apartment. Blood everywhere is hard to clean up. I'll take you outside to get it done." According to Dong's later confession, at that moment, he wasn't 100% determined to kill Xiao Yan. He had initially hoped to use threats to force her family into paying the money. However, under his father's incitement and silent approval, his violent intentions fully evolved into a brutal crime. According to Fei, who witnessed the crime, after Xiao Yan was pushed into the middle of the river, they stepped forward to check. About 5 minutes later, the Hang father and sons heard Xiao Yan's faint cries for help. At this point, Hong Xin ordered his 2 sons to follow the riverbank and look for her. However, Fei and Dong only stood at a distance for a few minutes, scanning the water. Seeing no movement in the river, they gave up the search, and Xiao Yan's final chance of survival was lost forever in the freezing current. On January 19, 2016, 15 days after the Crimean rescue team from the Public Security Bureau recovered a female body wearing a red sweater from a section of the Xinjiang River in Xinzhou District, Shangra. After forensic identification, Shangra police confirmed what they had feared. The woman was Pan Xiao Yan. Part 6. Justice and Reflection. If you were on a jury for this case, what would be your judgment? What punishment could possibly fit a crime where 3 men, a father and his 2 sons, conspired to murder a young woman over a financial dispute? And how do we make sense of a system where marriage can be reduced to a business transaction with potentially lethal consequences? On January 19, 2017, exactly 1 year after Xiao Yan's body was recovered, the Intermediate People's Court of Shangra City delivered its verdict. Hang Dong was convicted of intentional homicide and sentenced to death with a 2-year suspension of execution. His father, Hong Hong Xin, identified as the mastermind behind the premeditated murder, was sentenced to death alongside his son. Hang Fei was convicted of aiding and abetting a crime and sentenced to 3 years in prison. The Hang family was ordered to pay a total of 260,000 RMB in civil compensation to the Pan family. After the verdict, the Hang family did not appeal within the legal time frame, seemingly accepting their punishment. The Pan family, believing the sentences were too lenient, did file an appeal. However, on June 22, 2017, the Jiangxi Provincial Higher People's Court rejected their appeal, upholding the original sentences. As for the matchmaker, Zhong Zhong, she disappeared immediately after the case was exposed, fleeing to an unknown location. Before this tragedy, she had been a well-respected matchmaker in the region, warmly welcomed into any household seeking a spouse for their children. The photo on their marriage certificate remains the only picture Xiao Yan and Dong ever took together. According to Zhong Zhong, among the many potential matches she arranged, they were attracted to each other at first sight. Perhaps at that moment, both genuinely hoped for a happy marriage. Unfortunately, their union was rushed, driven by external pressures and entangled with factors unrelated to love, family urgings, the burden of the bride price, the influence of the matchmaker, and societal expectations. What began as a marriage turned into a bitter dispute, and the dispute escalated into a horrific crime that shocked an entire nation. In my 30 years investigating homicides, I've learned that the most disturbing cases are often those that reveal fundamental flaws in our social systems. This case exposes the dark side of treating marriage as a financial transaction rather than a loving partnership. The bride price tradition, while originally meant to show respect for the bride and her family, had here degenerated into something transactional and ultimately deadly. When Xiao Yan became unable or unwilling to fulfill her part of the bargain in Dog's eyes, he and his family felt entitled to take her life as if they were simply retrieving property they had paid for. The moral of the story. As I conclude this case, I want to leave you with some thoughts to reflect upon. First, marriage cannot be forced. A union built on arrangements, a bride price, and family pressure without love and mutual understanding can only lead to resentment at best and tragedy at worst. Marriage must be based on the free will of both individuals. No one has the right to coerce, detain, or harm another person in the name of honor or financial interests. Second, traditions should evolve with our understanding of human rights and dignity. The tradition of the bride price exists in many cultures, but perhaps it is time to reconsider practices that commodify human relationships. Only then can marriages be free from monetary influence and calculated motives, ensuring that love and mutual respect remain the foundation of a lifelong partnership. Third, no amount of money, financial transaction, or family honor is worth a human life. The Hang family's willingness to kill over 120,000 yuan reveals a profound moral failure that transcends cultural or financial contexts. If you find yourself in a relationship where you're valued primarily for what you bring financially rather than who you are as a person, recognize this as a warning sign. If you're in a culture where marriage is seen primarily as a transaction, work to change those values within your circle of influence. And if you're a parent arranging a marriage for your child, remember that your primary responsibility is to their happiness and well-being, not to financial gain or social standing. Because at the end of the day, what good is tradition if it leads to tragedy? What value does money have if it costs a human life? If you were in Xiao Yan's situation, faced with a loveless marriage and in-laws who saw you as property, what would you have done? Would you have sacrificed your happiness to fulfill a contract you never truly wanted? Or would you, like her, have held your ground even in the face of deadly consequences? These are difficult questions with no easy answers. But by grappling with them, perhaps we can work toward a world where no bride ever fears being murdered by her in-laws, where no marriage is reduced to a financial transaction, and where love, not money, forms the basis of our most intimate relationships. If you found this case as thought-provoking as I did, please share it with others. Not as a sensational story, but as a cautionary tale about the dangers of reducing marriage to a transaction and the importance of respecting every human being's autonomy and dignity. And if you'd like to see more cases like this one, cases that challenge our understanding of human behavior and social systems, please subscribe to my channel and like this video. Your support allows me to continue investigating and sharing these important stories. This is Detective Shernan, signing off until our next case file. Note, if you or someone you know is experiencing domestic violence or coercion in a relationship, please reach out to local authorities or domestic violence hotlines immediately. No tradition, financial arrangement, or family pressure justifies abuse or violence. Your life and well-being matter more than any cultural expectation or financial transaction.